Hi, if you don't mind, just
Sure.
just interesting.
Okay. Yep. You're all. There we go.
Okay.
So if you want to see entire room.
She didn't say podium, no?
All right, so we're not backwards. We're going to see the podium, and then we're going to see the panels. So if you can't move it right during the program, then actually, okay.
So this camera.
Yes, we want to be able to see the podium and the panelists too.
The rear left, try rear left. Now look at the cameras. There's the. Try the other one. No, it's on the other side, right, the other side of the camera.
Oh, so do the different camera?
Yeah, that's the. All right, now zoom out. Zoom out.
I gotcha.
There you go.
All righty.
Just tighten it up just a little bit. That's good. That's good. That's good.
That is perfection. That looks good. Yeah.
Okay, so now.
So those two middle, so the stragglers. Okay.
Now turn off self view.
I was just gonna ask if you want to use my laptop or yours.
Yeah, she's seeing it.
Cool.
So she would have to get this off the screen.
I think it'll just be but it's the
Oh, yeah, you still come in.
Self view is a third.
No, it's on her laptop. We're seeing the room, so selfie is just for us.
Oh no, I could just put it underneath. I didn't know if that was.
This isn't going to be in the way during
Okay, fabulous. All right, keep that was keep that. Okay, sorry. You can.
So
that. Okay.
I guess they're just gonna be seeing, people are gonna be seeing just the people will be seeing. So what Carlos
Let me
did
keep
like-
it spotlighted.
This'll turn to spotlights and goes to where we see it again.
Okay.
So,
Yeah.
that's
I definitely did not read it. I just thought, yeah.
It's 109 or 101.
Oh. Okay, so here's.
One first, right?
One first. One, and
One again.
yeah, and then 1 0.
1 0.
1 0. You can do it again because it went away. I guess 109. Show it live active video.
9.
Yeah.
I know the changes are.
Try 1 0 1 0.
Yeah, I didn't do it. Okay.
I thought it was 5, wasn't it? Yeah.
Show live out video.
Should I try like turning on the mic and then tapping it? Should I like turn on the microphone and then tap it just to see if like the probably not on.
It's on something.
I can hear the sound.
They should be able to see.
right at the very second when I win.
I mean, I could always put on self mute,
Yeah, try to self.
but I just feel like then it's. I mean, but is anybody on the Zoom ever going to be talking?
No, just the panelists and
Okay,
everybody else is seeing the room.
that's probably the way to do it. Then.
Yeah, it's just seeing the room right
Okay. So here's what I would like. Pictures, right? And then otherwise,
That shows up here.
That's what it.
Okay, perfect. Okay. And then I would like some pictures. There's usually groups that want to take pictures with which is great. What with Debbie and Nicole and myself, if possible. They maybe take pictures last year, and I now 65 pounds lighter, so I don't want to forget. It's the only reason why. Exactly.
Yep, it's good, Mike.
Okay. Cool.
Oh my God, I was like, I lost my blazer. I lost my jacket. Okay, sorry. Yeah. Is that cool? Good? Okay. Well, that's what I figured to see. Okay, perfect. What we're gonna try to do is
And it starts.
and or kind of that edge, our registration volunteers can share. But
Oh, it's all.
so we have some extra. We have some. There's a lot of so I'm not super concerned. We'll have two more seats over here. Oh, yeah, well, those two are there. I'm not sure the Venus coming, which is right now. But I was curious for her. So
Yeah, much better.
impact is under. So there is under. Right behind you.
Okay, some rays, black.
Yes. Not yet. Nope, not yet. Yeah.
I know, I said, you're so happy.
you have a good turnout? We did have a good turnout.
I could raise up
People were
the
like,
shade
oh,
for
it's
that
good.
time.
But I was like,
All right, you ready? All right, going for it. I couldn't hit it in time.
hi, how are you? Good to see you. Okay, so I'm gonna and lunch.
Yeah, so right here.
That's good. Yeah, and the black. So, lunch. I mean, no, it's all for you. Yeah. And I mean, I said, right? And then that way, you know. Right. Then I will. I mean, yeah, okay, so what I said, so I see our, there are a couple of people, right, live streaming here. Then check
Check, check, check. Check, check, check.
So this. What are you most proud of? Perfect. We are recording this.
One, two, one, two, one, two.
Yes.
When it's glowing red,
Red
Red
is
is hot.
green is
not
not.
green.
Yes.
We're not gonna be at the podium the whole time, so is it gonna matter in terms of feedback? or
You
no? Just
you
leave it
you
on?
can turn it off.
It's hot.
Here, if you like, this will be roughly over them talking. This is what the level is. Okay.
That's good.
Hello, everyone. Welcome. Wow, I didn't even have to do the clap. Or eyes on me. Parents in the room know what I'm talking about. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Christina Jackson, and I'm the Executive Director of Washington Council of Lawyers. And we are the Public Interest Bar Association here in DC. At the end of our program, you'll have information about joining and upcoming events, etc., because we want you to know all about Washington Council of Lawyers. But here's what you really need to know. We are community. So I hear a lot of great conversations happening. I see a lot of folks meeting other folks. That is wonderful. That's what we're here for. I hope also by the end of this program, you are inspired to make service a pillar of your professional life, and we're here to help you do that as well. Because you've attended our program, you're now part of our family. And that means if you need assistance, if you need to be connected, if you have questions, if you need to find out what the best restaurants are in DC, please let us know, because we're here to support you this summer and going forward. I was asked to remind you that if water is not enough for you and you need a jolt of caffeine, if you look in the silver drawers that are underneath the coffee machines, you will find soda. And I've been told on good authority there is caffeine in there. So feel free to partake. I'm going to give you a slight history lesson. In 1978, Washington Council of Lawyers launched our summer pro bono and public interest forum. And every year since, we have brought together lawyers and law students who want to make service an essential part of their professional life. So I am pleased to welcome you here in the room. And for you folks who are joining us virtually, summer interns and summer associates from across the country, thank you so much for joining our conversation. It is always so much fun to be in the room with you guys in particular, because you're just at the beginning of your career. You still don't care that you work 70 hours in a day, week. And you bring all this great energy. And we are thrilled that you are here with us. I would be remiss if I did not give a big thank you to our special events and fundraising committee members, especially our co-chairs, for bringing together this fantastic program. And you'll see the volunteers at registration downstairs around the room. Thank you so much, volunteers, because if you did not come and help us, we would not be able to bring you these engaging and diverse perspectives in our conversations. A reminder to the folks in the virtual audience, please share with us who's in the audience by typing your name and organization in the chat. We are going to save some time at the end for questions, and I have somebody monitoring so that we can answer those questions. So if you have questions, please put them in the Q&A, and we will get to those at the end of the program. Tomorrow and over the next 2 weeks, we will be exploring pro bono, public interest, and access to justice in our 6 virtual substantive practice area panels. You'll be getting information about the links today, tomorrow, and then at the beginning of each week. In addition, after the programs, we will send you the recordings and additional resources so that you will have them and be able to use them for the rest of your career. We are going to be talking about non-litigation pro bono and environmental justice, which is a new program for us. We're really excited. Tomorrow, starting at noon. Next week is poverty law and criminal law and death penalty, which is some really compelling stories. So we're looking forward to that. Next Thursday at noon. And then our final 2 programs on June 22nd are civil rights and civil liberties. So we'll sort of bring it all back together. Nicole will set us up, and then we'll talk about it again at the end, and human rights and immigration. I'm looking forward to those discussions, but I'm mostly looking forward to what it sparks in all of you. During our conversation today and throughout the summer forum, you can follow our conversation and contribute your thoughts on social media using the hashtag SUMFO23, SUMFO23. We really want to hear what you think. It helps inspire us. I am sadly far away from law school at this point, and I miss the energy. So please let us know what you're thinking. I am now about to introduce you to a legal legend. I am thrilled to welcome our keynote speaker, Nicole Austin-Hillery. She is president and CEO of the Congressional Black Caucus Foundation. We are thrilled to have had her as a board member for a number of years, and now she serves on our honorary board. She's a leading civil and human rights advocate and policy expert. Personally, I've been honored to work with Nicole. I learned so many things from her in so many ways that sometimes she doesn't even realize. I know you're going to leave this room with something that inspires you that something is going to get you through the rest of your career, I hearken back to some things that Nicole has thrown away, and I pick them up and I put them in my pocket and I keep them for those really dark times. It is difficult work to do this type of work, and you need to have people who support you. Sometimes you need people outside the law because they'll give you some perspective. You need your friends and you need folks to lean on, and Nicole is one of those people. She's going to talk a little bit about what led her to the law. So I'm just going to give you some career highlights of her distinguished career. I won't say long because then it'll make us feel old, right? Nicole graduated from Howard University of Law and began her work as the George and Lindsay Civil Rights Fellow for the Lawyers Committee for Civil Rights under Law. One of the reasons we do our Fellowships 101 in July is because that is an excellent way to get started in a life of service. So a little plug for our program, but a big plug for postgraduate legal fellowships. Nicole will talk about that a little bit. After her fellowship, Nicole spent 6 years working as an attorney at Marion Scallett, where she advocated on behalf of women and people of color experiencing workplace discrimination. In 2008, she took the helm of the Brennan Center for Justice's Washington, D.C. office as the founding director and counsel. There she represented the organization before Congress and the executive branch on issues like criminal justice, racial justice, voting rights, and good government for 10 years. Then she continued to advocate for systemic change when she became the executive director of Human Rights Watch in 2018. In that position, she led efforts to end violations in abusive systems. Her advocacy worked to combat systemic racism, improve the U.S. immigration system, tackle problems within the domestic criminal justice system, and advocated for policies to address poverty and inequality by national human rights standards. If that weren't enough, she also contributes to her community. In 2018 to 2019, she served as the president of the Washington Bar Association. She's a past president of the Washington Council of Lawyers. She formerly served as an advisory committee member of the ABA Standing Committee on Election Law, serves on the board of Common Cause, and is a former co-chair of the ABA Criminal Justice Section's Defense Function Committee. She's also been an adjunct civil rights professor at the University of the District of Columbia David A. Clark School of Law, and is a former Wasserstein Public Interest Fellow at Harvard Law. Right? I'm just tired thinking about all the things she's done. Can you just imagine what her pebble has done in the world, right? And we get to hear from her. Now, as the president and CEO of the Congressional Black Caucus Foundation, she is stewarding the organization to build and enhance the power of relationships and networks across the private, public, and corporate sectors to advance the global Black community by developing leaders, informing policy, and educating the public. So I know you're ready to get to it. With that, I welcome Nicole Austin-Hillery.
Thank you, Christina. Now, first, let me tell you all this. Whenever someone reads those bios, I swear I'm like, who the heck are they talking about? And let me just say, I appreciate that you said, you're not going to age me, but when you started out calling me a legend, I was like, okay, I'm old. You have to be old to be a legend, but I appreciate that, Christina. And I will tell you all, I have a theater background, so I like to walk around, but I'm conscious of the fact that we have folks participating virtually, so I won't do that. Folks virtually, this is for you. In fact, and Christina didn't know that little tidbit. I don't know if you ever heard this before. So I started out in undergrad as a drama major at Carnegie Mellon University. Yeah, one of the best drama schools in the country. But I always wanted to be a lawyer. So I'll tell you guys about that in my story. But I will tell you, I still live vicariously through all of my CMU theater alums. So this past Friday, for those of you guys have been in DC, you missed it if you weren't there. So the amazing Billy Porter was here. He was in town at the Warner Theater on Friday, and Billy and I overlapped at Carnegie Mellon, and we are friends. So I was hanging out with Billy on Friday. Yes. But because of that theater background, I like to walk around and talk, but I will be good today. See, that's what people say. They're like, now we get it. I am so excited to be here and talk with you all today. I consider myself a foot soldier of the Washington Council of Lawyers. As Christina said to you, I served on the board for many years, and I will tell you, it was one of the first things that I did when I became a lawyer was getting on the board of the Washington Council of Lawyers, because I had spent my whole life being dedicated and focused on public interest work and making an impact. And one of my mentors said, you should join the Washington Council of Lawyers. And at first I thought, well, I'm just a newbie lawyer. I can't get on the board already. And she said, no, you should think about getting on the board. And you guys will hear a little bit why. She said, you've done some things already, even before her law school. So try to get on the board. And somehow they saw something in me and took me onto that board. And this has been my family. And when I say it has been my family, I mean that not only have I had the privilege of serving on the board, but the people from the Washington Council of Lawyers have mentored me. They have provided opportunities for me in so many ways that I can't even tell you. And I'll tell you a little bit about why that's so important. So I first have to thank the council and thank Christina for this invitation, but I can't let time go by without thanking my very dear friend, Marcia Tucker, who you all who are summers at Arnold and Porter know. Marcia is such a, Marcia, I don't even know how to describe you. I don't know that there's a word in Webster's dictionary. She's a connector. She's a strategist, but all from the heart. Not because it's Washington and that's what we do in Washington, but because Marcia believes in doing good and doing well and supporting people who believe in the same thing. And also, I would be remiss if I didn't thank Larry, who is here, Larry Schneider, who is a partner here at Arnold and Porter, who has been on the board of the WCL. I think Marcia and Larry, before I got here, they did so much work and continue to do so much work and have just poured into me. So thank you both so much for that. So let me get to it. You know, I want to talk to you all about my journey, because I think hearing about people's journeys is so important. When you think about what you want to do and how you get to where you want to get to. But the first thing I'm going to tell you is this. I'm going to share my journey with you, but do not repeat it. You know how you get those little warning signs on those commercials where people are doing crazy things like jumping over mountains and they say, please do not try this at home. So that's my warning to you. Please do not try this at home. But you can learn from other people's journeys. And so that's why I want to share. So I am a kid from the capital of Pennsylvania. And because this is a smart room, I won't do the quiz I normally do, because sometimes in rooms I'll say, and the capital of Pennsylvania is, because there are still people in this country who say Philadelphia. And I'm like, no, it's not Philadelphia. It is Harrisburg. And I cringe because I'm like, where did you go to school? But I am proudly from Harrisburg, Pennsylvania, the capital of Pennsylvania. And I am a kid who grew up there in the 70s. In Harrisburg, for those of you who don't know, it is a city, but it is a small city. And I like to say I grew up with the best of both worlds, because it was a city, but it was small enough that everybody knew everybody. In fact, my husband jokes now, and he says, everybody in Harrisburg knows everybody. You even know the people from Harrisburg who now live in DC. And we do have intermarriages, not familial intermarriages, but I have a friend from Carnegie Mellon who came home with me one Thanksgiving, met one of my cousins, and they got married and had 2 kids. He's like, this is crazy. This is all Harrisburg. But that is part of who we are. But I grew up in Harrisburg in the 1970s, and I grew up in public housing. Now, let me tell you this. When you hear the term public housing, people have all kinds of images that pop up in their head. They'll think of the old 1970s show Good Times, and they'll think of high rises and all kinds of stories and anecdotes that I actually don't think are representative of my experience. I grew up in an amazing community. I didn't grow up in a big high rise townhouse. I grew up in a townhouse. We lived on a cul-de-sac. Everybody on our block knew each other. We left the windows and doors open. We had flower planting day. My community was amazing. And I didn't know that there were other people who thought my community was less than amazing until I got out into the world a little bit more. And I realized that there were people who made assumptions about kids who grew up in public housing. I learned that there were people who thought we weren't as smart as, who thought we would never amount to as much, who thought our parents weren't as worthy, who thought our parents didn't work, and all kinds of really negative assumptions. And I will tell you that my mother, who is the reason why I am whatever I am, had a government job, and she worked for the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania for her entire career. And the only reason we were eligible to live in public housing is because she was a single mother. But she poured into me and never told me no for anything. And I'll get to some of that later because I think there were times when she wanted to tell me no, but she didn't. And the other people in my community poured into all of us. My babysitter down the street, Miss Jackie, whom I loved, was so special and dear. And she not only helped to take care of me, she helped to take care of lots of kids in our community. But I realized that other folks weren't seeing us the same way. And this was long before words about disparities. I didn't know words like disparities. I didn't know, words, that really encapsulated how people treated certain groups unfairly until I got to the 8th grade. In the 8th grade, I had an amazing teacher, Lynn Scott John, and she and I are still friends to this day. I just talked to her about a month ago. But we had a segment in 8th grade where we focused on speech and debate. And at the end of that 8th grade year, Miss John gave out an award to the student most likely to succeed in a field involving public speaking. And I got that award. And Miss John sat down with me at the end of 8th grade and she said, look, what is it that you want to do when you grow up? And I said, Miss John, I want to be a courtroom stenographer. And she said, why is that? And I said, well, Miss John, after school, I'm in an after school girls club. And my particular counselor that I'm assigned to, her name is Lisa, and she goes to the Votech High School, and Lisa is super cool, and Lisa wants to be a courtroom stenographer. So I want to be whatever Lisa wants to be. And she said, that's all well and good, and that's nice. And she said, but do you realize that as we studied speech and debate, that whenever you had the opportunity to pick your own topic, you always chose topics that dealt with defending people, that dealt with giving voice to communities that were misrepresented, misunderstood, judged in ways that you didn't agree with. And she said, and you would get mad. She said, it would come across in your speeches. She said, and it was clear to me that what you want to do and the talent and skills that you have should be talents and skills that are used to defend and protect people like you and from communities like yours. And she said, one of the things that people do when they are focused in that way is they grow up and they become civil and human rights lawyers. A light bulb went off, a big old light bulb, a big old Philips light bulb. And from that day forward, I started learning more about what civil and human rights lawyers do, and I was determined to be a civil and human rights lawyer. And I pinched myself. And literally, when I talked to Miss John, I said, Miss John, you don't even remember that conversation, do you? Because you have taught so many people. And I said, but it was on that day that I decided this is what I was going to do. And if you talk to some of my old friends, people who've grown up with me, and I'm still best of friends with my friends from Benjamin Franklin Elementary School at 11 years old. My best friend, Nisi, lives in Texas. We just talked last night. They will jokingly tell you, yeah, once Nikki determined she wanted to be a civil and human rights lawyer, that was it. In fact, she carried a briefcase in high school. I didn't really carry a briefcase in high school, but that's kind of how they saw me because I was so focused and so determined. So for me, everything that I did was about reaching that goal. But now let me tell you guys about reaching goals. And this is why I said, don't do what I did. Because when you're trying to reach goals, sometimes things will get in the way. I know how it is and how it's been for all of you. I know you. I haven't met all of you directly, but I know you because you are just like I was. You were the class president. You were the student council president. You were honor roll, National Honor Society. You were the drum major. You were all those things. And I was that person in high school too. I was the class vice president. I was model UN distinguished delegate. I was the homecoming queen, all those great things. And people like us kind of think, oh, we're going to have these paths that we chart for ourselves. And at age 18, I'm going to go to this university. And at age 21, I'll be in this graduate school. And by 25, I'll have my first whatever. And then by 27, I'll be a partner. Well, guess what? You know that saying about the best, the well-laid plans, what happens? You have to be prepared in your life to follow different paths and to pivot. So I'm going to share with you, that's my first Nikkiism. I call these things Nikkiisms. People sometimes lay down, good advice or whatever. I don't know if it's good or bad, but they're my Nikkiisms and I'm going to share them with you all. And my first one is be prepared to pivot. Do not allow yourself to be hamstrung by a nicely laid out path. Because sometimes that nicely laid out path is not what's going to lead you to the biggest opportunities and the biggest chances you have for making an impact and for making a difference. So, as I said to you guys at the beginning of this conversation, I am a person who has a theater background. So when I was in high school, again, still completely focused on being the civil and human rights attorney, I had the privilege of going to a performing arts magnet school. So I spent half of my day at my academic high school and the other half of my day at my performing arts school where I studied theater. And I loved it. And I will tell you, I'm a big advocate of arts education because it does so much for you. And my drama teacher said, you know, you should think about going to a top university for theater arts. And she said, I know you want to be a civil and human rights lawyer. She said, but the training you will get is something that will benefit you. She said, it's so well-rounded. She said, and you are fortunate enough to be someone who has talent as well as academic skills. And she said, I think you should think about the universities that have top academics, but also top theater programs. And I was fortunate. I had won all these awards. I was a presidential arts scholar and had wonderful opportunities. Theater opened doors for me. And so I applied to all these amazing universities that had wonderful theater arts programs, and I ended up deciding to go to Carnegie Mellon University. But the one thing I learned when I was at Carnegie Mellon, at least at that time, is if you go to a Carnegie Mellon or a Juilliard, you know, any of those, or an NYU, the Tisch School of Arts, those schools, they're training people who are going to go on to be the Billy Porters. They're training people who are coming in the door saying, I want to spend my life and career in theater. And I was the weirdo who, when I got to Carnegie Mellon, said, can I please have permission to overload because I'm going to be a civil and human rights lawyer and I need some extra classes over in the College of Humanities. My friends in the drama department were like, what the heck is wrong with you? They were like, you are taking up a space for someone who is like serious about theater. Because for those of you who have arts backgrounds, you know how conservatories work and these theater programs work. People are kicked out in year 1 and 2. If you're not cutting the grade, you're kicked out in year 1 and 2. So literally the people who you start freshman year with are not the same group of people. Some of them will not be there when you get to senior year. And I was really lucky at Carnegie Mellon to not only be in that theater program, but I also was chosen to be in a main stage production my freshman year. Never happens. You don't get to be in main stage productions until junior year. So, but I was still that weirdo who was asking for permission to overload, to take courses in the College of Humanities and Social Sciences. So long story short, I realized that I was not going to be prepared to be a civil and human rights lawyer if I got my degree in theater at Carnegie Mellon at that time, because it was pure conservatory training. Now Carnegie Mellon has evolved that people can actually minor in theater. And you know, I said to the university president, where was that in the 1980s when I was there? But anyway, so I decided to change majors to applied history, which is now public policy at Carnegie Mellon, but that's what it was called back then. And I got my degree in applied history from Carnegie Mellon. And I went straight from Carnegie Mellon to the University of Pittsburgh School of Law. And I was not only at the University of Pittsburgh School of Law, but I was accepted into a double degree program to get my master's in public policy at Carnegie Mellon and my JD at the University of Pittsburgh. So again, you remember that list and that plan. I was on the road to success and greatness. Well, my first year at the University of Pittsburgh School of Law, I ran into some personal problems, not with my grades. My grades were fine, but my personal problems were such that I had to leave law school after the first year. Now, you can imagine, again, class vice president, homecoming queen, everybody knew I was going to be a civil and human rights lawyer, but I got to go home after doing only a year of law school at the University of Pittsburgh with my tail between my legs. And how am I going to explain to everyone that, like, you know, that path that I laid out so beautifully is not going to come to fruition, at least not in the way that I thought. So I had to pivot. So I moved back home to Harrisburg, and mom, being who she is, supportive, super supportive, but she's like, you got to get a job. Okay, you got to get a job, you got to do something. So what I did was I called Carnegie Mellon and I said, can I please have the addresses of every alum from the public policy school who are located in Harrisburg or somewhere in the central Pennsylvania region? Now, you guys, this is back in the day when you weren't emailing people, you weren't texting people. Literally, the alumni office had to give me names and addresses, and I had to write to people. And now, you know, Carnegie Mellon is a big tech school, so we had computers at CMU long before a lot of other schools. But even so, I still had my typewriter that mom bought me that I took to school my freshman year. And I got on that typewriter and I wrote to every one of those alums who were on that list. And I explained, I went to CMU. I'm going to be a civil and human rights lawyer. I did a year at the University of Pittsburgh School of Law. I've been waylaid, but I'd really like to do something that keeps me focused while I am, you know, doing what I have got to do and before I go back to law school. And I heard from about 3 of those alums, and one of them hired me. And they hired me to be an intern at a trade association. And this trade association was a trade association. They did something that was awful to me. They worked on chemicals. I didn't care about that. But they said, if you come and work at this trade association, we are going to help you. We're going to support you. You're going to learn all about lobbying. You're going to learn about legislative advocacy and policy analysis. And those are going to be things that are going to be great when you decide to go back to law school. So this is my second Nikkiism. Even though it was a trade association that worked on a topic that I wasn't too jazzed about. And also, I will tell you that in terms of our political persuasions, we were very different people. And I was the only little Black face in that place. So this was a very conservative trade association. And here I was, this 20-something little Black girl from Harrisburg. But guess what? They took me under their wings. They taught me everything they needed to teach me about legislation and lobbying and trade associations and building relationships across the aisle and with people who think differently. They taught me about doing legislative research and white papers. They were amazing to me. And when that internship was done, they said, okay, if you're not ready to go back to law school yet, we are going to help you get your next job. And they said, we think you should next go to the Hill. Now, I know here in Washington, we call the Hill. But if you're from a capital city, the state capitol is also the Hill. So they said, we're going to help you get a job on the Hill in Harrisburg. And they did. They took me up to the Hill and they introduced me to folks in the Democratic Party because I was a staunch Democrat. And they knew that in terms of my own political desires and my focus, that's where I would fit well. Now, I say that to you because remember, I now am the president and CEO of the Congressional Black Caucus Foundation. We are a nonprofit 501c3. My political affiliations matter not at all. But for the purposes of this story, I'm telling you all that I was a staunch Democrat and they said, you need to go work for the Democrats. So they introduced me to folks on the Hill and I ended up being hired by the Democratic Policy Committee where I was a research assistant. And my job as a research assistant, I was responsible for working with members of the legislature from the Democratic side and helping them to research and draft legislation. So that meant any idea that any member had for what they wanted to do, I was the person who had to do that research and learn how to draft legislation. So, for me as a kid in the 70s, I loved Schoolhouse Rock. I loved learning about how a bill becomes a law. And I was so excited because I was like, oh my God, I am working on an actual piece of legislation. Now, mind you, this wasn't a bill going to Capitol Hill, but it was our version of that. So I was super excited. And you can imagine that in a place like the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania, it's a big agricultural state. So I was getting all kinds of ideas from members. Nicole, tell us how we can, take cow manure and turn it into diamonds or whatever, whatever they thought, whatever their crazy ideas were. Some were crazy, some were really reasonable, but it was my job to do the research and figure out how to get it done or to tell them, no, this is why you can't do this. And I also got to work with the lawyers who worked closely with the policy committee. So again, was meeting members, learning about state legislation, learning about legislation and how a legislature works. And the beauty of Pennsylvania is that unlike some state legislatures, it is a full-time legislature. So you are working all year. It's not one of those states where you're in session for like maybe 3 months. It is all year, you're grinding and learning so much. And after I did that for a while, some of the members get to know you and they decide, oh, I want to work with you all the time. And that's what happened. So the head of the Pennsylvania Legislative Black Caucus said, Nicole, we've been working with you so much. We like your work. We want you to come and be the senior research analyst just for the Legislative Black Caucus. And so I did that and I got to work on all of those issues that I was so passionate about, all of those issues that brought me to wanting to be a civil and human rights attorney. I got to work on issues around affirmative action, around education equity, on welfare reform, on community development. And I got to go with the members to their districts. And many of the members of the Pennsylvania Legislative Black Caucus then and now were from the Philadelphia region. So I would go to town hall discussions. I would go to all kinds of grassroots meetings. And I learned how legislators and community work closely together. So my second Nikkiism is this: be open to the people who may lead you to something amazing that you can do. Because who knew that those folks at the Chemical Industry Council were going to help me get to a place where I would then be exposed to all of this policy and working with the Legislative Black Caucus and working with communities on the grassroots issues that I was so passionate about. So, and by the way, my boss at the Pennsylvania legislature was then Representative Vincent Hughes. He is now a senator in Pennsylvania, and some of you may see him. He's often on MSNBC with his wife, Cheryl Lee Ralph, the actress from Abbott Elementary, because he is still very much committed to these issues, and they now are kind of a powerhouse team, and they work on these issues and talk about voting rights and all these wonderful things together. So I went into Senator Hughes's office one day and I said, you know, Senator Hughes, I love this work, but I feel like I'm a big fish in a small pond. I said, I think I need to go to Washington to do this work. Now, mind you all, I still had not forgotten about law school, but I was getting these amazing opportunities and learning all these things again that I felt were preparing me to even be a better law student. And he said, okay, we'll support you. We'll help you get to Washington. And I applied for jobs in Washington, and I was hired by a government relations consulting firm in Arlington that still exists to come to Washington to represent corporate clients and help them to navigate the waters in terms of state legislation that also connects to their federal legislation. And because I had all this experience working for a state legislature, I was an attractive candidate. Now, here's my third Nikkiism. This government relations consulting firm had clients that I really didn't want to work for. They had clients from organizations and some corporations that did things that I did not believe in. And I thought, I can't work here because this totally goes against who I am and what I believe in. But one of the things I learned was this, that sometimes a door will open and you may have to represent interests and people and work with things that may go against who you are personally, but you have to find how you can bring your own personal constitution to that work and help make a difference. And I was reminded by some mentors, you need to get yourself to Washington. This is an opportunity to get yourself to Washington, to learn and to figure out what your next steps are. So I went and I worked for this government relations consulting firm, and I learned so much. And not only did I learn so much, it also helped to open my eyes. Because even though some of those clients represented interests that I didn't agree with, I was able to learn from them. I was also able to share with them my insights. Now, some of you are probably saying, how the heck did you do that? Because you were only 20 something. Well, the thing I left out about my story with Miss John is this. Miss John also helped me to learn when I was 13 and in the 8th grade that I had a big mouth and that I should use it for good. And so that's what I was determined to do. So I've never been a wallflower. I've never been shy, and I'm never shy of telling people what I think in a respectful way. That's a Nikkiism too. Never be afraid to use your voice and to bring your voice out, but don't ever use it in a way to harm or hurt. Don't ever use it in a way to insult or disrespect. There really are ways that we, in this work that we do, can find common ground. There really are ways for us to share our differences, even though we don't agree. And that was one of the biggest lessons I learned from working for that government relations consulting firm. Now, one of the things that I left out is this, because you all are probably thinking, okay, yeah, this is all career stuff. I want you all to know this too. This is my next Nikkiism. I don't know what number I'm on. Somebody keep count. Do not leave your personal self behind in the process of becoming the greatest you can be. Because while I was in the University of Pittsburgh School of Law, and I always say, this is probably the reason, I'm a religious person. So I always say, this is one of the reasons I think God let me go to the University of Pittsburgh, even though I left after 1 year. Because while I was a first-year law student at the University of Pittsburgh, I went that year to the National Black Law Students Association Regional Conference, BALSA. And when I went to the BALSA conference, for those of you who've gone to BALSA conferences, the last day, there's always a big dinner and a gala. And I was sitting at a table with my classmates from Pitt, and my girlfriend, Sherry, whom I'm still friends with to this day, she was actually just here in DC a couple weeks ago, she nudged me and she's like, oh, this really handsome guy is walking up to our table. And I was like, okay. And I turned and I looked and I said, oh, my heart like literally jumped, it like skipped a little beat. And this really tall, handsome man in a beautiful double-breasted suit sat down next to us. And he was kind of shy. And he said, may I join you? And the only seat left was next to me. And we said, sure. And he sat down and he wasn't talking much, but we were having a debate. We were having a debate on a racial justice issue. And he later said, you guys were saying some crazy stuff. I just had to jump in. So he jumped in and we were debating and having this wonderful conversation. Now, mind you, he was a student at Georgetown Law. He was in his third year at Georgetown. I was in my first year at Pitt. But all the Georgetown seats were taken. So the only place he could sit was next to me. So we ended up having such a great time talking, and we talked till 7:30 in the morning. Yeah, at the BALSA conference. And you all know there was a dance that night. People were having fun. We missed the party. We missed everything because we were talking all night till 7:30 in the morning. Also, later I would learn that he is not a morning person. And he was like, you have no idea how hard it was to like be up talking to you at 7:30 in the morning, because we also were leaving to go back to Pittsburgh at like 8 or something, or 8:30. And I think we got like an hour of sleep. And then he even got up to meet me to like bid me farewell and say goodbye. I had no idea how hard that was for him. That person became my boyfriend, and he is a born and bred Washingtonian. And so I tell people that moving to Washington was not just about career, it was also about love. He tells people, no, she is just one of those super ambitious people. I was just a little side note, but that is not true. It really was for love and for career. I will tell you, he is now my husband of 21 years, and we've been together ever since. But do not leave your personal life behind as you are reaching for success. The other thing that's important about that is this: as you are doing this work, as you are trying to do good work and hard work, and I'm assuming, because you all are in this room, you all are people who want to do civil rights, social justice, human rights work. As Christina said at the beginning, it is hard work. Some of the hardest things I've ever had to do were to sit and just listen to my clients and hear their stories. And that's one of the things you all have to do well. You have to be good listeners. They come to us because we have these practical skills and because they need our skills and expertise to help them. But part of your job is to be a listener. We at the Congressional Black Caucus Foundation do something that we call community conversations. And this is through our Center for Policy Analysis and Research. We have 3 divisions. We have a leadership institute, where we are growing the next generation of Black leaders, where we provide scholarships and fellowships and internships to students all across the country. We just welcomed our current crop of interns. We have about 70 of them, and they're from all over the country, and they are working for members on the Hill. Some of them are in C-suite internships where they're working for corporations. And we also are starting to put together one where interns will have an opportunity to work in philanthropy. But these students are doing that work. And then we also have our Center for Policy Analysis and Research, which is the substantive arm of who we are and what we do, where we work on issues of critical importance to the Black community. And we do research, we do publications, and we provide that information to the members to allow it to inform their legislation. And we also provide that information to folks around the country. And the third part of what we do is we are an educational arm, and we want to make sure that people all across the country are informed about issues of concern to how you empower the global Black community. Well, as part of our CPAR, our research division, we are doing community conversations around the country. And we were just in Tulsa, Oklahoma in March. And you all know the history of Tulsa. In 1921, there was a race massacre, and it destroyed the Greenwood community, which at that time was called the Black Wall Street. There were more Black businesses, hotels, home ownership than any place in the country at that time. And because of race and because of that massacre, that was all destroyed. And the community of Tulsa is still reeling from that destruction. In fact, there are 3 remaining survivors of the 1921 Tulsa race massacre. I've had the privilege and honor of meeting them. And one of the things that we did when we went to Tulsa in our community conversation was we listened. We stepped back And we provided opportunity for the community members in Tulsa to be on the stage, to tell their stories, not just about the massacre, because there are still many descendants of the massacre that are living in Tulsa, but family members. But they are also trying to figure out, how do we regain economic power? How do we ensure that our story never gets lost and serves as a lesson for the rest of this country? And so our job there was to provide that community conversation opportunity, but then to listen. And the members that we brought there with us, the job was to listen. That is part of what you have to do, because that's going to make you the best and most informed public interest lawyer, public policy advocate that you can be. It is not about self. I don't care how many times you have a Christina that will get up and say all these wonderful, mellifluous things about you. None of those things are about me. Those things are about the communities that I've been able to help serve and how I've been able to have an impact. And that is the question you ask yourselves. All of those jobs that you heard Christina say I had, none of that was about resume building. I've had one mentor who said, Nicole, every time you get a new job, dust off your resume and get ready for the next one. And I said to that mentor, no, I just can't do that, because that's not why I do the work that I do. So when you ask yourselves, what is it that you want to do? Do you want to do human rights work? Do you want to do civil rights work? Ask yourself, how can I have the most impact? That is what I allow to guide my decisions and my choices. It is, where can I have the most impact? And literally, even when I had those opportunities, where, as I said, when I moved to Washington and I worked for that government relations consulting firm, well, of course, I would have preferred to come to Washington, and I tried. I actually tried to work for one of the senators from Pennsylvania, and I didn't get a job working for one of them, but that was an opening for me to come to Washington, to start building my network, to start learning, and to start understanding how businesses work and how all of these dots are connected. And so part of your job, as you were thinking about what you want to do, is thinking about, how do I have impact regardless of what the opportunity is that I have in front of me? Now, I will tell you all, as I said, that is what I allowed to lead myself. When I finished working at that government relations consulting firm, I ended up going to one of the best jobs I've ever had, and that changed my life. And that was being the research director for the NAACP Legal Defense and Educational Fund in their Washington office. And I will share this with you too about that. And this is something that you all have to remember as you make your decisions about what you want to do and how you want to have an impact. When that job opening appeared, I didn't think I was qualified. I told myself, I've only done a year of law school. It's LDF. It's the nation's premier civil rights firm. There's no way they're going to hire me. And it was my husband, who was still then my boyfriend, who said, you need to apply for that job. In fact, it was him who brought it to me. He said, you need to apply for that job. He said, because look at all the things you've done working for the legislature. You did government relations work. He said, this is their DC office where they're doing policy work. He said, I think you would be great. This is my next Nikkiism, whatever number we're on. Do not doubt yourself in doing this work. Because this work is so hard and it is so challenging, it is so easy for us to doubt ourselves. Sometimes we are our worst enemy, because we tell ourselves, no, for me at the time, no, 1 year of law school at the University of Pittsburgh isn't enough. I already need to have that JD. We always tell ourselves why we can't, instead of telling ourselves why we can. And let me just take a moment to say this. If you do research and you look at data on things like self-doubt, I have to just say this, for women, the numbers show that women do that more than any other group. Don't do that. Remember that little message I said, don't repeat this at home. Don't repeat that. Do not tell yourselves you can't do something. And it was because my husband said, nope, you need to do this, stop doubting yourself, that I applied to work at LDF. And when I applied to work at LDF, I told them, they knew my whole story. And I said, but I'm about ready to go back to law school. And they said, if you come work for us, we will help you do that. We will support you. And that's just what they did. I was their research director for 2.5 years. And when it was time for me and I was ready to reapply to go to law school, they did letters of recommendations. And I also ended up getting one of their Earl Warren scholarships to help me pay for all 3 years of law school. And not only that, it also was my teaching. It was my school where I learned everything I needed to learn to begin a career in civil rights law. My very first day working at LDF, one of the major Supreme Court voting rights decisions came down, Shaw versus Reno. So this was the 90s. I know when we think about voting rights, we're all focused on Shelby versus Holder. But then Shaw versus Reno was one of the big, it was a redistricting case. And so my first day at LDF, there I was on the steps of the Supreme Court with Penda Hare, who was the head of the Washington office then, and got my picture taken with the lawyers from LDF. And we had our picture put in Jet Magazine, which doesn't exist anymore. But it was a door opener for me and a game changer. But again, if I had not, you all, left the University of Pittsburgh School of Law with my tail between my legs, thinking that I was a failure, none of that would have happened. Now, I'm not telling you all to leave law school. Let me be clear. I don't want to see in a newspaper that the president and CEO of the Congressional Black Caucus Foundation advised people to leave law school. I'm not saying that. What I am saying to you is this: do not be afraid of failure. Failure can sometimes open so many doors. And in fact, I mentioned to you all my friend Sherry, whom I'm still friends with from the University of Pittsburgh School of Law. Sherry says to me all the time, we should have left when you left because you have a better career than any of us in our class. That's not true. But I do appreciate her saying that, because she let me know that even though you faced a difficulty, you were still able to move from it and do some really important things. Now, I'm going to wrap this up because I really want to get into the conversation I'm going to have with the WCL president. But I want to leave you with a few other things. Along the way, as I was doing this work, as I was getting these opportunities, as I said, I always thought about what is the impact that I can have. Do not fear the impact that you can have. You are going to have hard decisions to make. You are going to have moments where you're going to question, should I say this? Should I do this? One of my drama teachers from high school always said this to me, and I still keep this advice to this day. And she said, follow your gut. Your gut never lies to you. You know how when you have those moments and you're thinking about, should I do A or B? And you know, you get that little gnawing feeling in the pit of your stomach. That's your gut telling you what's right and what's wrong. Follow your instincts. Trust your own instincts. You all are smart, you're capable, you're well prepared. Use those instincts to guide you and to guide you in your decision making. And let me also say this to you, that as you think about this work, understand that you can have impact in so many different ways. I had someone say to me when I left the Brennan Center to go to Human Rights Watch, they said, Nicole, you know, we're so surprised you're leaving civil rights behind. And I looked at them and I said, what do you mean I'm leaving civil rights behind? They said, well, you're going to Human Rights Watch. Do you know that when the Universal Declaration of Human Rights was created, that the genesis of it was based in civil rights? That work is inextricably linked. You cannot in this country say, I care about and do civil rights work if you are not connecting that to human rights work. Is voting rights not a human rights issue? Is eradicating health disparities, is that not a human rights issue? Is ensuring clean water in communities so that babies don't get lead poisoning, is that not a human rights issue? It is. So do not let other people tell you what your impact can be. And think about every opportunity that you have in front of you. Ask yourself, what is it that I can do with this? And how can I make a difference? So when I made the decision to go to Human Rights Watch, I went to Human Rights Watch because I believed that we needed to do more in this country to connect human rights and civil rights together. And in fact, if you go to some of our greatest leaders in this country and you look at their writings and their teachings, they will tell you that. If you are familiar with many of Dr. King's writings and his speeches, listen, Google how often Dr. King talked about human rights and how much he connected them to civil rights. When Malcolm X went to the UN, when he decided that the issue of race and justice in this country was not just an issue for the United States, this is a global issue, he took it to the United Nations. He went around the world when he did his pilgrimage to Mecca that gave him a new sense and a new way to view these issues. He said, these are issues that are happening around the world. These are global issues. And when I was at Human Rights Watch, little did I know when I went there that in 2020, on Memorial Day weekend, that a man named George Floyd would be murdered. And that changed everything. That is when I knew that being at Human Rights Watch was one of the best decisions I could make, because it was then that the whole world as you all will recall, not just the United States, but the whole world was talking about, is this issue of race a human rights issue? Is this issue of race something that not only is an issue in the United States, but is a global issue? I can't tell you how much our work expanded. And because Human Rights Watch is all around the world, we were having discussions and doing strategy meetings with folks in India, in Pakistan, in parts of Africa, because everyone was dealing with this same question. How do we create a level playing field? How do we create justice for people? Because who we are in our essence and at our core is the same, no matter who you are, where you are, or what country you live in. So think about where you decide to work and the opportunities that you have, how you can take them and raise the bar in terms of how people are thinking, because that's what I was able to do when I was at Human Rights Watch. Now, for me, coming to the Congressional Black Caucus Foundation was a dream come true. Because of the community that I grew up in, one of the ways that I always wanted to have an impact was to ensure that I was using my talents and skills to give more opportunities to the Black and Brown community. So being the head of one of the nation's major Black organizations was a dream come true for me. But my question when I came to the foundation was, how can I have an impact? How can I continue to do this work? And doing this work through our research, through growing the next generation of leaders, is how I am able to move that work forward. My last Nikkiism is this. Sometimes an opportunity will come your way and you won't even see how you can make a difference, but sometimes other people, your mentors, others can see that. Because I will tell you, when the search firm called me and said, we want to talk to you about being the president and CEO of the Congressional Black Caucus Foundation, my first question was, are you sure you want to talk to me? And my second statement was, you know, I'm a troublemaker. I said, so we're talking about, a foundation that's affiliated with members of Congress. I am a troublemaker in the vein of the late, great mentor of mine, Congressman John Lewis, who said, get into good trouble. But I reminded them I'm that kind of troublemaker. And they said, no, this is what we want, because we want our research to impact the world. We want our future leaders to impact the world and to be change makers. And so the path that you have taken is a path that we think can help us to move from great to greater. So every day I am privileged to do this work. And the ways in which we at the Congressional Black Caucus Foundation are connecting the dots is because our work is not insular. We are working with stakeholders all around the country. In fact, Charles Lowry here is the president-elect of the DC Bar. And one of the things that Charles and I just talked about is, let's talk about the foundation and how we can use the work of the foundation to help support what we're doing here in DC and with the bar. We have stakeholder conversations with leaders from the Lawyers Committee for Civil Rights Under Law, from the Leadership Conference on Civil and Human Rights, because our job, our opportunity, and our ability is to be a connector. We host every September the largest Black public policy conference in the country. In September, this year, from September 20th to the 24th, we will hold the annual legislative conference. People in DC will tell you, people from all over the country come to that annual legislative conference. It's where the members will showcase their legislative agenda and their issues. We have brain trust, we have policy discussions, but we are bringing grassroots folks from all across the country. We're bringing state legislators from across the country, where we are talking about how can we solve problems that are critically important to the Black community. And let me just say this, if you are working on solving problems for any community, and for us, it's the Black community, that's helping to solve problems for the United States, because we have a melting pot in this country. Regardless of all the conversations that are going on that may tell us otherwise, we are a unified nation in that we have so many different voices, so many different representations, whether we're talking about race, religion, sexual orientation, gender. We all have stories to tell, and our histories are important. And if we're doing the work of all of our individual communities, we are doing the work of the United States. Because I don't know about you, but those founding fathers, for whatever issues people may have or I may have, that Declaration of Independence made certain promises to us. It said that we all had access to and the right to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. And so that means that the work that we are doing is all about that. And it's all about ensuring that we have that for everyone, and everyone's history is important and is a part of telling that story. So let me leave you with this last Nikkiism. Go out and be bold. Go out and be bold. Make changes, make differences. Don't do it the way I did. Don't leave law school after a year. Do the things that you think are going to allow you to be a change maker, because that's what public interest, public policy, social justice work is all about. When the Washington Council of Lawyers was started, it was started because a group of lawyers said, those of us who are really focused on progressive social justice issues need a way to come together and need a way to provide a vehicle so that we are supporting public interest advocacy and lawyering in the District of Columbia. It was also at a time when Black lawyers and other lawyers of color were not as prevalent in the DC bar and other unified bars. The Washington Council of Lawyers saw this as an opportunity and decided this is how we're going to make a change. And here we are all of these years later. So be bold and think about, how can I be a change maker? Don't let anybody tell you you can't do what it is you want to do. Don't let anybody tell you your dreams are silly. Don't let anyone tell you that because you grew up in the projects or because you grew up in Bel Air or anything in between, that you can't be a change maker or make a difference. You can. And I charge you with every day thinking about the path that you are walking and thinking about, how is the work that I'm doing speaking for me? I tell people this all the time. Marsha was just saying to me, we were just talking about my wardrobe because I'm also kind of a fashionista. But my girlfriends and I were joking recently. I know this is macabre, but we were joking about we weren't joking about funerals, but we were talking about our funerals. And I was joked with them and I said, okay, you all know I'm leaving instructions. I said, two things need to happen if I die before any of you. Number one, I need to make sure there are no fights over my clothes and shoes and purses. Number two, I need to make sure that there is a big sign up in lights over the casket that just says Diva, and that there are lights flashing. And third, I want you to play the song, one of my favorite gospel songs, May the Work I've Done Speak for Me. Because that is why this work is important, that we are all doing. As I said earlier, it's not about you. It's not about your lovely degrees, and you all will have lovely, amazing degrees, and you will have amazing resumes. But this work, connecting the dots on human and civil rights, being people who attack systemic racism, who attack racial discrimination, who attack gender discrimination, who fight back against those things. That is work that is about community, and it is about changing lives, and it is about making sure that everyone has an opportunity to live unencumbered and in the way that this country promised, and that this world, through the sheer fact of being human beings and through our human rights, it's about ensuring that everyone gets to live their best life. So I charge you with thinking about that every day as you do this work, and thinking about what you will do. And remember that what you do and how you do it is not going to look like the person next to you or the person behind you or the person in front of you. In the words of one of my favorite musicals, Pippin, and one of the songs from Pippin, everyone has to find their corner of the sky. So I charge you with finding your corner of the sky and figuring out how you can be the best change maker you can be. So with that, I leave you, and thank you all so much for this opportunity. My water.
Okay. Red is hot, green is not. That's what I learned today on the microphone. We are now going to bring it down to what you can do, right? You are just starting out in your career. And so we're going to bring it back down from the lofty to the practical. But before we begin this conversation, I do want to introduce our board president, Debbie Cuevas-Hill. We've referred to her a couple times. She is the supervising attorney at the Consumer Law Unit for Legal Aid. She represents homeowners facing foreclosure and consumers with debt collection matters in DC Superior Court. Prior to that, she was with Legal Counsel for the Elderly. And prior to that, she was at Legal Aid. She is also clerked at the DC Court of Appeals and was an Equal Justice Works Fellow. So needless to say, Debbie brings a wealth of experience to our conversation. And part of what we're going to talk about today is kind of, what does your path look like? Does it need to be linear? Spoiler alert, no. Does it need to make sense to you right now? Again, spoiler alert, no. And how is it that you are going to pull together experiences that are going to get you where you want to go? And so with that, I'm going to turn it over to Debbie and Nicole with a reminder that we're going to leave some time for questions at the end. And so folks who are joining us virtually, if you have questions, please put them in the Q&A. And with that, I'll turn it over to the two of you.
Thank you, Christina, and thank you to all of you for being here today. Oh, yep.
Oh.
No.
Oh.
Green.
Oh.
Can you all hear me?
Oh, okay.
Okay.
All right, got it.
Okay. I think I got it. And thank you, Nikki, for everything you've done for Nicole, for everything and all your Nikkiisms. I counted over 10, maybe 15. My paper is full of them. I learned so much. You're always so inspiring. So thank you. You started off with talking about everything you've done for the Washington Council of Lawyers and the importance of a public interest family. Can you tell us why it's so important to seek out those mentors, to have a public interest family?
Sure. And Debbie, I wanted to tell you, I wanted to make sure I told you, my husband was a New York legal aid attorney for years. So I'm particularly fond of that part of your background.
Thank you.
And I know we have legal aid interns in the room too. So thank you all for all that you're doing. So much of this work is about learning. It's about learning. And so you have to have people that you can learn from, as I said at the beginning of the conversation, Marcia Tucker, Larry Schneider, having those lawyers around you who can set an example and show you opportunities and can also just be sounding boards for you. You will have strategic questions along the way all the time. How can I do this? How should I do this? Those are the people who are going to provide roadmaps for you. You cannot do this work alone. We're not islands. We're not individual islands, and particularly when it comes to public interest work. One of the things that I would often say to people, when I was at the Lawyers Committee where I started my career, is none of these organizations have, 500, 600 lawyers. None of Legal Aid, the Brennan Center, none of these organizations have that. It is important that we do work in an interconnected way. That we have co-counsel, that we are working with other organizations. If you are not doing that, if you're not making those connections, if you're not surrounding yourself with people who can give you advice and who can help you to strategize and help you to figure out the game plan for some of the work that you're doing and how you're trying to attack some of these problems, then you're going to miss out on so much. And not only that, you're probably not going to be very effective. It's just not possible to tackle these huge problems and do them in very small ways. And lastly, you have to remember that life you are continually learning. It does not change. I don't care how nice the intro is when you're about to speak and all the things people say. I continue to this day to call people for advice. In fact, I have something that I call my kitchen table board. And those are the people who are like my board of directors, but like for me personally. We have a board of directors at the Congressional Black Caucus Foundation, but these are my personal board of directors. The people who, when I'm having a big issue that I have to try to understand and strategize about, they are the people, like I literally will call them together on a Zoom call or on a conference call and say, here's an issue, I need you to help me through it. You must have that for yourself if you are doing this critically important and difficult work. And I would say, and that's no matter where you are, whether you're at a public interest organization, whether you're in government, whether you're clerking, whether you're at a law firm doing good work, you have to have that kind of support system in place. And so that's why these kinds of relationships, these kinds of organizations are so important, but also because you also, and this is the last thing, you want to give back. This is a way to give back, especially if you are in an organization where you feel like you're not exactly yet doing the kind of work you want to do and having the impact you want to have. You can have impact in other ways through organizations like the Washington Council of Lawyers that will give you opportunities, to help communities. And those things can then in turn help to prepare you for opportunities that will get you to doing the work that you really want to do.
Thank you so much for that. I can't agree more that it is so important to do this work with others to collaborate. I think the COVID-19 pandemic really highlighted that for me in the legal services community, where we all had to come together and work from our homes on Zoom and figure out how are we going to help the people that needed the help most and that were most affected by the pandemic. So thank you for that. I have to say, it really spoke to me when you talked about the interconnection of human rights and civil rights, because I went to law school, also knew, I think in 8th grade that, or middle school, that I wanted to be a lawyer. I did Model UN. A lot of the things you said resonated. And here I am all these years later. I've focused my career on working in legal services and doing housing work and consumer work and saving people's homes and housing. And that's a human right. And so I'm wondering if the definition of being a human rights lawyer and a civil rights lawyer has changed for you over the course of your career, and if so, how?
It has absolutely changed. I think when I first decided that I wanted to be a civil and human rights lawyer, I thought mostly about things domestically. And when I was in my fellowship at the Lawyers Committee, one of the honors and privileges I had was being a part of the NGO delegation to go to Durban, South Africa, as part of the Conference Against Racism. And that was an epiphany for me. For one, when I landed in Africa, first of all, just as a Black woman, I was like, oh my God, I'm in this place where there are people who look like me and who look like, they could be my family. And it was also empowering because I was in a place where I saw leaders, diverse leaders from all over the world. But when we talked to one another, I realized that we were all speaking the same language. Even if we were coming from other nations where our native tongue was different, we were all speaking the same language. We were all talking about racism. We were all talking about sexism. We were all talking about sexual equality. We were all talking about water rights and housing and education and about policing. Even though policing, it seems like, it's a big issue now, and of course it is, but those issues weren't new. And it helped me to see that these issues were universal. And that's how it changed for me. It helped me to see that, you can't, as I said, these are inextricably linked. You cannot talk about civil rights without talking about these human rights issues. And you can't do this work without understanding that there is a world connectedness. And that's how it changed. But also, I will say this, particularly when I came to Human Rights Watch, when I became the first executive director of the US program at Human Rights Watch, they had never had a head of the US program before. And I said to them during the interview process, why now? What's changed? And they literally said, after the recent election we had in the United States, because I started there in 2018, and they said after the 2016 election, it became clear to us as an organization that the human rights issues that we focused on so globally were also of note here and were urgent here in the United States. You know how amazing that was to hear a human rights organization say that we as an organization didn't realize and think that the human rights issues were as vast and as palpable in the United States as they were across the world. So that for me was a change. And I also think that was a change for the human rights community as well, because I think it was then that they also started looking at these issues differently and realized that, sometimes, we all put our privilege lenses on and realize that, okay, the United States is, because you sit in the United States, you have a sense of privilege and you think what's happening in other countries is not happening here, but it is. And so it is our job to universally and collectively work on how we address these problems.
Absolutely. And as a follow-up to that, how can the audience get involved in human rights and civil rights issues right now? How can they be change makers?
Okay, there are two ways that I'm going to suggest to you. The first one is this: start where you sit. And when I say start where you sit, all of you have engagements and involvements in churches, in community organizations, in the girls' club, the boys' club. Start where you sit. Do not think that these conversations around race and justice and equity have to be ones that you have in rooms like this. You need to be having those conversations right where you are. And here's one of the things that I would challenge you to do as well. And this is hard. I'm not saying, you guys, this none of this is easy. It's hard. When I say start where you sit, don't only look at the organizations that you're already affiliated with, also look at your own interpersonal interactions. I challenge myself always to make sure that the same standards I hold people to when I was doing, litigation and there were corporations on the other side, or when I was fighting for someone's housing rights. The same standards I hold all those people to, I try to hold everyone to, not only myself, but the person in my family who's sitting across from me at the dinner table, who I think makes a joke that is completely inappropriate and that I think is not worthy of them and is not sensitive to the differences that we have in this country. I charge you to open doors, have conversations, respectful, candid conversations, but start right where you are. Because if you're a change maker, you have an opportunity to be a change maker at every level. The second way that I'm going to suggest is look at organizations who are doing the kind of work that you want to do. There are organizations all over that could use you, that would love to have young, bright, smart law students walk in the door and say, I have time, I want to give it to you. Research those organizations, and there's a list of them that you can find all over the place. We at the foundation, my colleague who I want to recognize, Athena Hernandez. Athena is the director of our marketing and communications division. Say hi, Athena. And Athena is amazing. She, first of all, thank you, Athena, because she helped to prepare me for today and worked with Christina. But Athena, for me today, she pulled together a list of organizations that we are happy to leave with you and share with Christina, so that Christina, you can share, because we want to make sure that people know there are places that need you and that want you. And don't do that thing that I remember at the beginning of my conversation. I said, do not say, I'm not ready, I'm not qualified. Yes, you are. Yes, you are. They need your thinking. They need your strategy. They need your support. They need your bodies. So start where you are in your own communities with your own group of family and friends. And I would also charge you to not be afraid to talk to strangers. My mom, my whole life, has said, Nikki, I don't know what it is about you. There's something on your forehead that says, talk to me. And it's true. And it's still true. I will have conversations with people all over the place about anything and everything. I had one yesterday in Home Depot. So remember that you are a vessel. You're a vessel for change everywhere you are and everywhere you go. So start where you sit, start in your own communities, and then research and look for those organizations that really need you and could use your expertise right now.
Those are great tips. We heard you talk a lot about pivoting throughout your career. Do you think it's better to stay at one organization to grow, or to seek out new experience for that career growth?
I think that's a great question. And I will take it back to what I've shared with you all is my guiding force. And you all have to determine what is your guiding force. As I said to you, for me, my question is always, where can I have the most impact? So I have never, what have I had? 4 jobs since law school? That's not a whole lot. I mean, I've been a lawyer since 2000. It's now 2020. So for 23 years, I have some friends who they've been to 10 places. For me, the question has always been, where can I make a difference? For me, if you allow altruism and how you want to be a change maker and how you want to have an impact to guide you, those other things are going to come along. I have never said to myself, I need to go to place A because I need more litigation experience, or I need to go to place B because I need more experience doing public policy advocacy. Being focused on how I wanted to work and the communities that I wanted to touch led me to places where I was going to get those experiences, because you can't, if you say to yourself, I want to be someone who is helping individuals and communities where their housing is at risk. If you are going to a place where you're going to be working on housing risk, you're going to get litigation experience. You're going to get policy experience. You're going to have to work with legislators. You're going to have to work with city council people. But it's not those tasks or those skills that led you to that work. It's your dedication and devotion to doing that work and to helping those communities. So I believe that's true for everyone. I think if you stay focused on where you want to be and how you want to have an impact and how you want to give of yourself and how you want your skills to be used, those are going to open up opportunities to you. Now, I will say this, you should be taking your temperature. You should at various times be asking yourself, am I still having an impact here? And if you feel like you're not, then that's the time to ask yourself, is there some place else I can be? You also should be taking the temperature of the experience you're having at a place. Because look, I love Don Quixote, but I know we can't always chase windmills. There are realistic questions you have to ask yourself. Maybe you're in a place where you're not getting the kind of professional development that you need. Maybe you're in a place where you're not getting mentoring or where your opportunities are limited. Always take the temperature and ask yourself, am I getting those other things that I need so that I can be the kind of change maker I want, so that I can be the kind of person who can have the impact? And if the answer to those questions is no, then you should be having serious conversations with yourself, with your mentors, with your loved ones, with your partners, to ensure that you are putting yourself in a place where you can continue to have the greatest impact and be as effective as you want to be. And can I also share this? This is one thing that I didn't share with you guys. Build a squad. I already told you about my kitchen table board, but build a squad of supporters for yourself. Have truth tellers. Surround yourself with truth tellers. Do not surround yourself with people who do what Christina did, which is just say, you did A, B, C, D, and E. I love that Christina did that, but I also would hope, and I think Christina would, also pull me by the coattails and say, okay, there's something you need to know that you did wrong. You need to have those people. You need to have those people who say, yes, you are amazing and wonderful, but there's some other things you need to know. My husband is that for me. He is the main truth teller for me. Every time we're at events and things, like sometimes people will walk up to him and they'll say, oh, you're so lucky to be married to Nicole. And he's like, uh-huh. Have those people who keep you grounded, who remind you that every day you get dressed the same way as everybody else. You look in the mirror just like everybody else. You have bills to pay like everybody else. You're amazing, but you're just like, we're all the same. Okay, have those people around you. And those will also be the people who will say to you, even when you can't see things for yourself, who will say, maybe there's a change that's afoot for you that you need to consider. Or who will do like my husband did for me when I said I wasn't ready for that LDF job. That truth teller will be the person who will say, yes, you are. And here you need to do it. And I'm going to support you. So make sure you have those too, because that is as important as determining whether you're in the right place, is having people who can help, who can see what you can't, and who can give you objective and loving advice.
You answered my follow-up question.
I'm sorry, and I wasn't peeking.
No, I know you're not. The type is very small. I think it's so true that in this work, if you're looking at making a change, that there is no way that you're not going to end up getting the varied experiences to truly make a difference. Like you mentioned, the as a lawyer, especially, right? Like the litigation experience, the policy experience, the community building experience, the outreach, all of that is connected. And I think you put it so well. I also completely agree about the squad, right? To keep doing this work for so long. It's so important to have the close group and also community like this group, because it's a hard fight. And like you said, none of us can do it alone at all.
Right.
And so I'm wondering what keeps you in this work. And I promise I'll leave time for you all to ask questions as well.
Before I tell you what keeps me in this work, let me also share and I agree with you, how it's so important to have those people. My husband jokingly says, Athena, I don't think you've heard this yet. My husband says I'm part of the civil rights mafia. He uses mafia in the best sense of the word, but literally he's, the folks who are running the leadership conference, Damon Todd Hewitt, who runs the lawyers committee. I've known and been in the trenches with those people for years, like even before I was a lawyer. When I was at LDF, Wade Henderson, who is the president emeritus of the Leadership Conference on Civil and Human Rights. Wade knew me when I was a 20-something wet behind the ears. In fact, when I got married, he teases me to this day. For some reason, when I got married, Wade said, beware of the hyphenated woman. I don't know what that means. I'm still trying to get him to explain that to me. But it really is. These are the relationships. You are building these relationships along the way. And so I tell my husband proudly, I'm like, yep, I'm like, we are the civil rights mafia. And now even some of my friends, when they see him, they're like, they'll say, Alex, the mafia is in the room. He's like, I know. But it's important to have that community. But what keeps me doing this work is, this is who I am. This is who I am. There's nothing else that I would do. This is not about a career. This is who I am. This is my walk. You have to determine, as I said, find your corner of the sky. What is your walk? If you are walking in your purpose, it is not a job. Nothing that I do ever feels like a job. And that is a blessing and a privilege. It is about doing what I think I was called to do. My prayer for myself daily is order my steps so that I am doing what I need to be doing and using the talents and the skills that I've been blessed with in a way that will bring good to others and that will make a difference for others. So that what else would I do with this big mouth? And being a troublemaker and somebody who likes to get into good trouble, there's nothing else I would do. Now, I will say this though, and I shared this with you guys earlier, but when I talked about pivoting, be open. I would have never thought in a million years I'd be the president and CEO of the Congressional Black Caucus Foundation. Would have never thought. Understand that when you think about what keeps you in this work, understand that there are other ways to do this work. There are myriad ways to do this work. It may be that at a particular moment in your life, doing this work means working at a particular law firm. It may mean working at legal aid. It may mean working at the Lawyers Committee for Civil and Human Rights. It may mean someday being a pundit on MSNBC. I'm just saying, keep your mind open to change and keep your mind open to how you can have an impact. So that doesn't mean changing this work. So for me, all of this is the work. I've had some people say to me at times, oh, you're no longer practicing. I hate when people say that. To me, lawyers are practicing whether you are in a courtroom, whether you are on Capitol Hill and you're chief of staff to Senator whomever, whether you are the president of a major nonprofit organization where you are working on social justice issues, that is practicing law. Because all those things that you learn in law school, all of those skills are so transferable and allow you to do this work. Those are the things that allow you to manage and run a major organization. Those are the things that allow you to be a top-notch litigator. So when you say what keeps you in this work, it is knowing that this is what I was meant to do and be, but also understanding that how that shows up, how that manifests itself can be different. And don't ever pigeonhole yourself into thinking there's only one way that I can do this work. There's only one way that I can be a change maker, because you never know what's going to come your way and what opportunity you're going to have to be a change maker in an altogether different venue.
Thank you for that. Well, I promised I'd leave time for questions, so please don't be shy, raise your hands. I know I still have tons of questions, so I'm sure you do too.
Or comments.
Or comments, exactly. I have a question back there.
Hi.
Summer associate with Step 2 and a rising 2L at Howard.
Sorry, y'all.
So my question, you talked earlier about the community conversations that you have had around the nation. And I wanted to hear more about the community conversations that you've been having in DC specifically. So I'm also a Washington native and very interested in learning more about what you're doing in the city. And so wanting to have you to kind of share more about those community conversations that you're having in DC, how the word is getting out to the community members to come join this conversation, and then how we as law students and just members of the community now can get involved.
Sure, great. And it's a pleasure to meet you. You all, I refrained from saying at the beginning of the conversation that I went to the only law school there is to go to in the country, Howard University School of Law. I refrained, but now I can fangirl a little bit. We had a community conversation here in DC during last year's ALC on gentrification. And we talked about the Black community in DC that historically has lived here and how their power is waning and what needs to be done to ensure that that community is not lost. That was the conversation we had. And we're going to have more community conversations. So I would urge you to go to our website, cbcfinc.org, and sign up to get our emails, because you will find out about those things. But when we do the annual legislative conference, when we're doing things here in DC, Athena and her team, they do all kinds of work to make sure that that word gets out. So we will make sure that you have that information. But that was the conversation we had in Washington last year. We are going to be having more conversations as we do this year's ALC. And I will tell you, that's a tough conversation. But let me say this to you, that, and this is another plug for the Washington Council of Lawyers. The year I was president of the WCL, Larry and Marsha, you guys remember this. Remember when we did the whole conversation on gentrification and housing? And I remember thinking, I think this is a really important conversation to have. Can we have it? Will there be support for it? And there was. And that goes back to what I said earlier. Don't be afraid to have those difficult conversations, because it was the right thing to do. And having those continued conversations in Washington is the right thing to do. And, you know, we can't have conversations about race. We cannot have conversations about equity and class and economics. All of those things are inextricably linked. We cannot have those conversations, or let me say, we cannot even pretend to do something about those issues if we're not having those conversations. So that's why we're going to keep having them, whether people like it or not. We're going to have them. You all remember that former Attorney General Eric Holder said during his tenure that, you know, as a country, we're cowards when it comes to talking about issues of race. And he didn't mean that in a bad way. It was to motivate us to say, we cannot start being change makers if we can't at least start talking about and admitting to what the issues are in this country. So we're going to continue having those community conversations. I would love for you to get information about what we're doing. I would love for anyone who is here, and even if you're not here, to come to the ALC, to our largest public policy conference that we have every year that is focused on Black issues and issues of concern to the Black community, because that's where we're having those conversations. And even in a more broad way, that's where the members are having those brain trusts, where they're talking about those issues and we're trying to problem solve. And I'm a big proponent of this, as Athena and my team, they're sick of hearing me say this. I do not like conferences where people come together, everybody's dressed really nice, they have fun, we have these wonderful conversations, you get wonderful material, and it sits on a shelf collecting dust. That's not what we do. We are about taking what we learn, what we bring together, the people that we bring together, and figuring out how do we take this to the next level. So I would love for you and other law students at Howard and other law schools to be a part of that. And let's make sure, I will make sure you have my information so that we can talk more. And I urge you all to go back. I know Dean Holly is gone. I don't know who the new dean is yet, but I always remind Howard to pull on me to come and talk and get Howard students engaged, and St. Georgetown, any of the schools, because we want to make sure that we're providing a template for folks to get involved. So thank you for that.
Thank you for that question. Any other questions?
In the back, I see a couple. I think one. The funding issue is such a hard one. No, go ahead.
I was just going to, maybe for those that are listening virtually, perhaps we should repeat the question, and which is a great one, which is, how do we deal with the lack of funding for pushing these issues?
Great, thank you.
Of course.
And as I was saying, thank you for that question. It is a hard question. One of the things, well, there's two things that I would suggest. One is, and this is something I learned when I first went to LDF, I did not know what the philanthropic community really was when I first went to LDF to be their research director. I didn't know there were foundations that funded, social justice litigation. And I learned that quickly. But I also learned that we in our organizations have a role to play in helping to define the need. And I think that's one of the areas that we have to work on. We have to define the need because the funders are there. They want to support the work, but it's up to us to help lay out the roadmap and say, this is where the need exists the most. So I think helping to have more of those conversations, helping to lay that out more succinctly for the funding world and really developing closer relationships with the funding community will help to guide that. It's the lawyers who are on the ground, the advocates are on the ground who can say what the need is best. It's not the people writing the check. And look, and I've got friends in the funding world and community, and they know I say this to them. You have to let the people who are in the trenches guide the decision making. And so we have to help facilitate those kinds of positive conversations that will allow that to happen. That's number one. Number two, we also have to remember that it's not just the philanthropic community, it's also corporate America that has to and should be helping to fund some of this work. I had a conversation with someone in a firm recently who talked about, the various corporations that after the murder of George Floyd, so many of them came to the forefront and said, we want to give money. We feel like we have an obligation. But there was a report in the New York Times, and I think the Post reported on this too recently, that a lot of that money is drying up. That many of those corporations that stepped up and said, we have to be a part of the problem, part of the solution, are not around those tables anymore. We have to continue to hold their feet to the fire. We have to remind them that we all are in this together, that your corporations are in these communities, that you don't have the benefit of being able to say, I'm gonna step away from these issues. No, we all have to be in this. So that's a part of it too, is holding the feet to the fire of those stakeholders who are around the table, who are entrenched in our communities, and who have an obligation, frankly, to be a part of this. We at the foundation have a new report, in fact, that's going to be coming out. That's going to be talking about corporate social responsibility and what is the role of corporations when we're talking about making a change, making communities better. And mind you, many of our funders, the majority of our funders right now at the foundation are corporations, but we have folks around the table who've said, no, we think this report is necessary. And we're around the table because we believe we should be supporting future Black leaders. We believe we should be supporting research that will help arm communities with information and resources that they need. So those are the two ways that I think, and as I said, I know that's not easy. I know those things aren't easy, but I think we have an obligation to push those conversations.
Absolutely. I think we have time for one more question. Lourdes.
So that's an important thing. About that's one comment that I wanted to share. And the question is about you mentioned, I care about sort of pro bono. Types of pro bono that is not pro bono or let's say environmental aspect. So you did mention the conversation responsibility. And my question was going to be about human rights that go beyond the traditional, CSR aspects. So opportunities in those kind of areas like environment with all these, ESG focus or the business and human rights that include environmental but goes broader in terms of and opportunities also to work with human rights issues, considering all this technology impact on
Mhm.
It's a great tool in many ways, but it's also it's so-
Just
Sure.
to summarize, sorry,
Okay,
Nicole.
that's- sure.
Just to summarize for those of you logged on virtually, the question is, how can you seek out pro bono opportunities both in the environmental field and in the human rights field as they relate to technology and those impacts?
Yes, thank you. Shameless plug, you got to join the Washington Council of Lawyers. Seriously. And organizations like WCL that exist in your jurisdictions, you've got to join them. This is what we focus on. We focus on where is there a need and how do we connect folks with pro bono opportunities. And because we have a diverse board, we have a diverse membership, that means there's opportunities abound. It's not like we just have one issue area that presents itself for us at the council. It's going to give you many opportunities. And because also there are different experts and practitioners around the table that you're going to meet, that means you're going to be meeting people who are doing environmental justice work. You're going to meet people who are doing housing work. You're going to meet people who are working on water rights. That is one of the ways to do that. But I will also say, be entrepreneurial. Be entrepreneurial. You know how I shared with you guys in my comments that when I left the University of Pittsburgh School of Law and I realized I wanted to do something that would help to prepare me for law school, that I reached out and I just asked the university, give me the names of all the alums who have their degree in this area and I'm going to write to them. Be entrepreneurial. If the opportunity doesn't exist, if you want to do pro bono work in an area where it's not particularly evident, be entrepreneurial and seek those folks out. Do research, look and see who in the heck is working on this issue. What organizations? Is there a person in this community or in this legal community who's working on that issue? Call them up. Say, this is what I'm interested in doing. Can you be a resource? Can we have coffee and just talk about that? And trust me on this. I tell law students this all the time. When people say, call me, like I just said to the young woman from Howard, we're gonna talk. Do not take them at their word. Call them. Do not be shy. Do not be afraid. All of us were in your shoes at one point. Christina was saying, how long ago law school was. We were in your shoes. And the people who said, call me, those are the people that I called. I will tell you all this and as my last example. The very first internship I ever had was working for a Pennsylvania state senator. Well, I'm sorry, was not working for him, but was calling a Pennsylvania state senator who has since passed away because I wanted to get an internship working for the state legislature or working for one of the government agencies in Pennsylvania. He was my state senator. And I just called his office. And then I wrote to him and said, you represent me. My mother is a state government employee. I'm going off to college at Carnegie Mellon, and I want to be a lawyer, a civil and human rights lawyer someday. And I'd really like experience, working in state government. And his office helped me to get my very first internship. But it was because, as I said to you guys earlier, my mom never told me no. When I said, Mom, can I call Senator such and such a she never said no. She was like, okay, you want to do that? We'll figure out how to make that happen. So don't be afraid to just ask the question. The worst thing that can happen is that someone says no. And so what? Go on to the next person. But be entrepreneurial and join organizations like the Washington Council of Lawyers.
Thank you, Nicole. I know Christina's going to close us out. I see her coming over.
Thank you. I promise I did not pay her to say that, but I will tell you one thing. We do facilitate, right? So if you have questions like that, how do I? Ask me and I will tell you. If there are people, I cannot echo this enough. If there are people who say, call me, do it because they mean it. If there are people who want to help you, do it because they mean it. This is a very difficult profession you are embarking upon, and you may feel like you need to do everything on your own. No, you do not. Now, that was a perfect segue into what this summer forum is all about, and that is helping you figure out where service fits into your professional life. And so over the next 2 weeks, we are going to talk about some specific subject matter areas, pro bono opportunities, opportunities to be in the public interest, opportunities for service, but those aren't the only ones. So please, if there is something that you are interested in that is not one of those 6 panels or isn't tangential to one of those 6 panels, let me know and I will help you. I will close out by saying 2 things. One, thank you so much for your attention. Thank you for showing up. The next step is to show out. Whatever it is that gets you up in the morning, I am finally in the position where I don't go to work every day. I go and do what I love. And that is honest to God, and not because some of my board members are sitting here, right? What is your passion? And then we'll help you figure out how to follow it. Thank you all so much for your time. I will see you tomorrow at noon virtually. Take care.